Welcome back for the continuation of our FPS and Unity videos. In this video, we're going to implement the shotgun weapon, as well as finish up some of the blaster here. Most notably, I do want to throw in some sound effects, and I realized that my aim down sights, I forgot to also zoom in the camera. So let's take care of that real quick before we move on to the shotgun. So that's going to require us to open our weapon blaster script. And let's start with fixing the camera for aim down sights. So we are going to need another internal variable just to remember whatever the user has set the FOV to. And FOV stands for field of view. Normally it's something like 80 degrees, 90 degrees, and it represents how much of the screen that you can see. When we start up, we want to get the current FOV so we know what to return to. So we'll just say initial FOV equals camera.main.fieldofview. Now, the main camera is kind of a weird thing. You don't actually have to search for it. So whatever camera is flagged as the main camera is going to come up when, and you can look at this, you can see the first enabled camera component that is tagged main camera, and it's read-only. So this will grab that component and all the settings on there. So it's a very fast way just to get the current camera. And so we are going to change that. So right after we kind of do our clamp here, let's do zoom FOV change for aim down sights. And that's just camera.main.fieldofview equals, and we'll do another lerp so that we kind of choose a number between the two values. And we'll do initial FOV and 0 based on, or not 0, let's go 40. So 40 is a pretty zoomed in number. So we can save this and we could test this. We could also turn this 40 into a weapons setting about how zoomed in it becomes. So we could call this public float zoom FOV and set that to 40. And then we could use this variable, instead of just hard coding it to 40 right there, we can then just use the zoomed FOV. So when we hit play, we'll be able to actually see that my weapon zooms in now. Pretty easy, and I can't believe I forgot that line. And so now we get a nice zooming in effect as the player kind of focuses in on what they're looking at. So now notice there was no sound when I was charging. When I was poking around in the files, I found that there were some sound clips that we could use for a charge up. So let's go and enable that. This is going to fall under related prefabs. So we're going to an audio clip of called sound charge up, and another audio clip of sound charge loop. So the idea is that there is a sound of the weapon charging up, and then once it's reached its max charge, or once that sound effect is done playing, we just loop the "you are fully charged" sound. And so actually going about doing this is going to be pretty straightforward. We actually need a new method here to stop my audio, because basically I need to tell the thing to stop playing the charge sound when I release to attack. So play audio is going to need a companion method, and I'll just duplicate this, called stop audio. So again, try to get the source, and then we don't need a parameter. So clip isn't going to be a thing. And instead of play one shot, we're just going to stop it. And so like this is a null protected method, so that if audio source happened to be null, we don't crash ourselves if you never enabled it. So just something that could be convenient. So we want to look into Fire 1 for this. So we're going to put our sounds here. So before we set is charging to be true, if we entered this, is charging would be false for the first time. So we want to use play audio sound charge up. And then once we set this to true, that'll kind of mean that we only played it once. So if this is the first time in this if statement, and then after all of this business, if, and this is just doing it kind of, so I want to check to see if it's currently playing a sound. So the idea is we want to null check, and I know I have that method to kind of do it safer, but this works too. We check to make sure the audio source isn't null, and then I check to see if it is not playing. And if it's not playing a sound, we'll then play a charging loop sound. So if the audio source is not playing a sound, play the looping charge sound. And so that way we get that loop sound. So we can save this. And then we jump back over to Unity. And we edit our weapon prefab. And we'll see that we have new slots here. So there's audio clips inside of the sound effects for launcher charge up, launcher charge build up, and then launcher charge loop. But we're not going to make our launcher charge, so that's fine if we use that thing sounds here. And now we should be able to test this, now that we've attached all of this. Oh, I forgot to tell it to stop playing the sound when we actually shoot it. Because notice when I tap it, it plays that whole thing. So we need to actually use that stop audio method. So when I release, to do stop the sound, I even put it as a to do stop audio. And then that change will make it so it doesn't play that sound as we're continuing to attack. Oops. Shouldn't have switched that because it will crash if I switch to a weapon that we haven't done yet. I mean, you can kind of hear it faintly in the background when you tap the fire button, but that's not a big issue. And I will say the audio sound effect isn't exactly synced to the amount of time we have that it takes to charge. But that would be something you'd want to do in like your game if you were trying to make something a little bit more polished. So we're good with that script at this point. So let's go about making the shotgun. Now, the shotgun, there's a kind of interesting design about it. That's the launcher. Notice the back of this thing has the 4 pistons plus the little almost D20 looking thing on the back. This is the same weapon, just with a different front. So that means the pistons actually have the same positions. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to making the pistons do things. So that tells me I can reuse my piston positions for this weapon. So let's start by taking the script, and I'm going to, while it's selected, if you hit Control D, it will duplicate it. Now, Visual Studio is not going to be too terribly happy because it has another weapon blaster class. So I'm going to rename this to Weapon Shotgun, and then double click it. Now, an important rule about classes is that they do have to match the file name. So, well, they do in Java. I'm pretty sure they need to here. Actually, I don't think they do in C#. But either way, we should match it to the file name. And at this point, we'll have that shader graph thing in there. At this point, we need to go through and prune the things that we're not going to need from the shotgun, and maybe update all of this. So time in between attacks, yeah, we do probably want to keep that. Maybe bump this up to 0.7. Damage of the projectiles. Maybe I'm going to rename this to damage per pellet, and drop this down to like 5. The damage of each pellet. The speed isn't going to matter. We still need an aim down sight speed, and we can maybe make it a little bit slower because it's a bigger weapon. Make it 0.4. It is not going to have a charge time. We don't have a charge time bonus. We will want to keep the zoomed FOV. Now we need to add how many pellets it's going to have. So maybe right here we'll do number of pellets. And maybe we'll do, this is going to get into balancing it pretty correctly. If we do 6, it will hit for, and if we do this out of each barrel, then that will hit for 60. That seems reasonable. And that's the number of raycasts per barrel. Again, we can always change these numbers. Damage. Then we need the spread. How inaccurate is this weapon? So we'll call this pellet. Oh, well, that's the tooltip. Pellet spread angle. And I found that 5 works. 5 is pretty atrocious, but we'll do 5. And then lastly, a modifier for aim down sights bonus. So we'll call this public float pellets spread aim down sight bonus. And that will be We'll start it at 0.5. And I know mechanically it wouldn't make any sense that a shotgun is more like less spreads less if you're aiming with it because it doesn't know that you're aiming with it. But from a design standpoint, we're going to reward the player for restricting their view with the weapon being more accurate. So if they're taking the time to aim with it, then we're going to represent that with less spread. And in this case, lower is better. So like this is a multiplier onto the spread angle. All right, so let's continue kind of going through here. So we aren't going to have a projectile prefab, but we will need a hit effect. So we can call this hit effect prefab. It will need a crosshair, so we'll have to give it a crosshair. And it doesn't have the charge up and the charge down sounds. And the internal bindings, let's just make a array for barrels. And then we'll just have one muzzle flash and one muzzle light. We won't do the particles on this one. So we'll take out the particles. We will keep the weapon positions. I will swap around the Z here and move that to 0.67. Okay, piston start, piston stop, we'll keep those. Cooldown, we'll keep. Audio source, we'll keep. Aim down sights ratio, we'll keep. Is aim down sighting, we'll keep. We don't need is charge. And we do need last piston height, and we do need initial FOV. So now we just have to go through and clean up the rest of these methods. So nothing needs changed on awake. On update, we can cut the charging behavior, but let's not cut this immediately. We only want to make the pistons come down based off of the attack. So I'm going to cut all of this, leaving only the for loop. And instead of last piston height, I'm just going to use piston end. So the idea is that when you attack, the pistons puff out as if there was a huge amount of pressure in the weapon, and then it's repressurizing the weapon. Okay, play audio doesn't need any tweaks. Stop audio doesn't need any tweaks. The muzzle flash, we no longer need this if statement. And we no longer need the particle effects. Fire 1. We're going to end up really heavily overhauling this. So, honestly, it's going to chop that. We're going to come back to that. Fire down, doesn't really need anything. Fire up, won't need any of this. It's okay if we delete all this. We'll rewrite all of it as needed. Aim down sighting is all fine. And so that's the rest of it. So let's save this and jump back to our Unity project. It's going to recompile the script, and now make sure we're in the shotgun prefab, and we can attach this to the shotgun so that now we've got all of our settings here. So we do need a few things. We can start by picking the crosshair if we want. So we can just jump over to the textures, UI, and just, pick a crosshair. We need to make the hit effect. The sound effect, there should be a sound for it. So there is a shotgun shot. We'll put that there. And that's most of the external stuff that we need. The rest of this is just going to be dealing with like the pistons and whatnot. So we have 2 barrels. And right now it just calls them cylinder 1 and cylinder. So I am going to rename this to right barrel and left barrel. Now, remember, we don't want to use these as my spawning positions, because that's forward is considered to be the z-axis, and the z-axis is not pointing forward here. So I think making a child under this, create empty child, and we'll call this right barrel shot spawn. That's interesting. It is inheriting that rotation from here. Well, that's fine. Then in that case, I might be better off not childing it to that, and instead childing it up to weapon parent. Or I guess I could probably do gun root. Yeah. So I'm going to then create another. Oh, it's still. Well, I can reset the transform on this. So I just need to position it to where it would make the most sense to come out the right barrel. Seems like a good job for the 2D view. That seems pretty good. Yeah. All right, so that looks good, and that is the right barrel. So we can just duplicate this, highlight it, Control D, rename this to left barrel shot spawn, and we would just make this X negative so that it is symmetrical with the other one. And so now we've got our 2 spawn points for where the attacks are going to come out of. Gun muzzle could be used. We could use this to hold our light and our flash effect. I don't think it's used for anything else, so I don't see why we couldn't just repurpose it. So on gun muzzle, we are going to want a sprite renderer. That is a component. And sprite renderer. Oh, my kitty is here. I don't know if you can hear her. So we want to give it a sprite effect, which is going to be found inside of the sprites particles, and then we could pick one of these that makes sense for kind of a shotgun effect. So I'm probably going to pick, maybe one of the stars might not look bad, but I like this light one. So I'm going to take that and place it. I'm going to have to make sure that I have the gun muzzle selected, and I'm going to take light one and place it as the sprite, if it lets me. Well, I guess I need to convert this to a sprite. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to move it over to my materials and sprites, paste it here so I don't ruin the original one. Turn this into a sprite. Tell it to load the alpha from grayscale, and then hit apply. Now I should be able to attach this. Oops, that's audio. Kind of big. And that's because I forgot to adjust the pixels per unit. So I was using 512 because this is a 512 by 512 graphic. And that's up to if I think this needs to be bigger. You know, if I want it to be bigger, I can just scale it here. I'm going to make it blue because I feel like the shotgun's kind of like a blue effect. And then add the light. So I am going to create a child object of, well, where is that? The weapon shotgun. We're going to create an empty child, and we'll call this gun muzzle light. And I'm going to position this, giving it a component, rendering light. I suppose I should probably grab the hexadecimal value here. And so I can use the same hexadecimal value for this light. Range of 10 seems a bit excessive, so I'm just going to go range of 2. And I'll see how that looks. So then let's kind of attach this all together. So we can attach the gun muzzle to the muzzle flash. We can attach the gun muzzle light to the light. In the barrels, we need to attach right shot spawn and left shot spawn. Pistons, well, we need to make this a size 4 array, and we put them in the same order. So if I recall, we used the piston socket. So we're going to go piston socket 1, piston socket 2, piston socket 3, piston socket 4. Now let's test these graphics. Let's go script up the spawning of the hit flash. I'll probably turn the ray casting into a separate video just so this one doesn't get any longer. So let's go back to the script. And at least set up the effects. So when we fire the weapon, we want to play our audio. Then we want to trigger the effects. So that is trigger muzzle flash. And then set the cooldown. And this should be all we need. Now, at this point, we still to do spawn raycasts. So we still need to do that. But we should still see the weapon like light up and the hit thing appear. And so in the next video, we'll actually do the raycasts and the particle effects when it hits something. But let's make sure that this works. All right, so this weapon works. Now, if that sound effect is too loud, you can always just adjust the sound. And maybe make the light a little bit bigger. So, first off, I forgot that I should turn off this. So I should turn this off because it gets turned on whenever the attack happens. And then I can just bump up the light with a larger range. And I'll turn off the light so that it doesn't start on when the weapon comes out. And so it looks good. Now all we've got to do is actually set up the raycast, which it's a little bit of coding, and then set up some kind of hit effect so we can actually see what this thing is doing. So far, so good. So make sure your weapon actually goes through that process. Check the code if you need to. Remember, I attach it to this video. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video when we actually get the raycast working. Thanks for watching.